Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about a familiar, possessed, spirit charmer, wherever you want to call it, deck profile. There's a little bit of a different take on this list. I was looking at different lists on YouTube, and I found a lot of people built their decks differently than the way that I did. And I did just want to mention this too right out the gate. There's something very important as someone who's messed with a lot of rogue-based decks. This is the rule you want to follow. When you're playing a rogue-based deck, you have to do one of two things. You either have to, you have to make your deck so fast, it can compete with the meta. It can compete with Phantom Knights dropping, 4 different negates and a scythe. It can compete with Sword Soul dropping a bunch of different things here and there. It can compete with Tri-Brigade. It can be with the best of the best decks, right? That's how fast it goes. Or the number 2 thing you want to do, and this is what usually ends up working, is you want to make the meta so much slower that your deck can actually compete with it. That's why when a lot of people saw the new Cyberdark structure deck, even though the Infusion monster was really, really cool, the main thing people were excited about was like the new trap card, the new continuous spell, and the fact that you could stun your opponent a lot better. So this is more of a stun-based Spirit Charmer, Familiar, Possessed deck profile. So it'll give you guys a different idea on how to build the deck. And if you do like this type of content, let me know by clicking that like button and that subscribe button, of course. But for starters, I'm only running 1 copy of Familiar Possessed Ausa. I'm only running 1 because I'm only running the Earth kind of like boss monster for the deck. And this is just, if I draw another spellcaster and this card, I can use this card as the Earth material, right? And then I'm running 3 copies of Familiar Possessed Hida. Now, you can actually, this can be any of the Familiar Possessed ones. This can be like a wind, a fire, and a water one. This can be 3 water, 3 wind, 3 fire. I chose 3 fire because fire is my favorite attribute. It doesn't really matter. This is just really a name. This is a spellcaster with 1850, so it triggers the continuous spell. And it also can give us access to Nefarious, which can give us access to that boss monster I was talking about, who is Awakening of the Possessed Nefarious Sir Archfiend. I'm only running 1 copy. I was running 3 for a while. 3 definitely clogs. 2 is not that bad, because there are situations where you could see a second one, but you can special summon it from the deck. You can special summon it from your hand, and the reason why I built the deck around this guy, this being the main engine, is just simply because he's the best one. Now, I like the water one a little bit because it does search the spiritual water art, which is able to snipe a card out of your opponent's hand. As well as, I believe it's a Darkwield Dealings on summon. If the fire one is okay, I guess. Burn damage isn't really that relevant unless you're running a burn deck. Like, if you're running more burn cards, I could potentially see it, but this is just the best one because it does special summon a level 4 monster, and it's any level 4 monster, by the way, which is super duper good. And that's it. That's it for the Familiar Possessed monsters. There's just not a lot. You don't want to be maxing out on monsters. I see a lot of people running like 2 of each one, or like 3 of each, and they have like 12 monsters. Like, if you read this card, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. Unless obviously you have, the Spirit Char, the Hida, the Fire Charmer, and a face-up fire monster, and sending them to the grave. Like, it doesn't do anything in multiples at all. So that's why I don't really like the Swarm version of this deck, because all that ends up happening is you have a bunch of monsters with 3,000 attack, and that may sound good, but against a good deck, they don't care. Against a good deck, you're just going to get Access Code Talker, pop the continuous spells, and your board's going to get wiped. So running a little bit different, more stun version of it. That's why I'm running 3 copies of Witch of the Black Forest. Witch of the Black Forest searches every single card in the deck if it's sent to the graveyard. It gives you good follow-up, and also, by the way, it can search DD Crow, it can search Droll Knockbird, it can search Effect Veiler, and that's the main reason I'm running this card. Now we have access to Droll Knockbird, which can stun our opponent. There's some decks that just hard lose to Droll Knockbird, right? This can also search DD Crow. This can search so many different cards in the game. There was a deck I ran when this first came back, that was like Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest and a bunch of hand traps and just different ways to pop them. And it worked out super duper well because hand traps are really powerful and being able to search them is really good. Unfortunately, you can't search Ash though, right? 3 copies of Nefarious Archfiend Eater of Nefariousness. Its second effect in the graveyard is not super duper relevant, but could come up with Fairy Tale Snow. And this obviously is just the earth monster that you use to summon out this guy. They kind of look like each other too. I think that's supposed to be that. If anybody knows the lore, I feel like there's a lot of cool lore on the Spirit Charmers. I could be wrong about that. One copy of Performage Trick Clown. This actually ends up coming up a lot. Like, let's say, for example, this is the card you use. Like, you go Trick Clown, bam, you special summon out the big guy who I just keep losing, right? Comes back out, right? Like that. This special summons out here. Trick Clown special summons itself back out, right? Also, Spirit Charmers does discard his cost. And so you can do a little cheeky play here by discarding the Trick Clown. Not running too many copies of it, but it is a pretty decent card, and a Spellcaster, which works out super well. 3 copies of Fairy Tale Luna for obvious reasons. Because of the way this deck functions, a lot of times I will just leave this card on the board by itself. Because if you got to remember that it has a secondary effect where it can bounce a card and itself. So now we're bouncing our opponent's monster and we're summoning this card back out. Now obviously it can be negated, right? But if you bounce a monster that you're sure your opponent, like for example, Sword Soul, the level 10 monster that's like Floor, I think is the name of the card. This is a really good way to bait that card out, because what ends up happening, like let's say that card already used its effect, you normal summon this, you try to bounce this and that, they're not usually running a second copy of that card. There's a lot of decks that are only running 1 copy of Phoenix Enforcer or 1 copy of Dragoon, and if you've already baited out the effect, you can end up bouncing it right back. Like, a lot of people don't think to play around this card's secondary effect. I am running 1 copy of Fairy Tale Snow, even though it's a token for right now. I think it's lost in the mail or something. I don't know. You can't trust too many things. But I am running the 1 Fairy Tale Snow. Fairy Tale Snow made this deck absolutely a lot better. Not like crazy good, but it used to be like a rogue strategy that was made fun of. Now you have access to Fairy Tale Snow, which is probably your best stun card, because it is a spellcaster and there's just so many great things you can do with it. And for the last monsters, 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, 1 copy of Effect Veiler. Like I said, only 1 copy because Witch of the Black Forest searches it, because it does have 0 defense. And it's a spellcaster, so if I draw it and I don't see the need to use it, I can actually use it to start off my combo pieces, right? And Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, I always run. I'm running 3 different versions because that's what you got to do. This is the best hand trap in the game. And Veiler's really good right now, actually. So the fact that this deck can effortlessly search it by getting access to Witch of the Black Forest is super great. That's actually it, though, for the monsters. It's a decent amount of monsters, though. Even though we're only running, 4 Familiar Possessed, this guy, and, 3 copies of this thing, we're running a good amount of monsters, but we're really just trying to run, Spellcaster Toolbox. That's really what it's going on with. 3 copies of Spirit Charmers. I shouldn't have to introduce this card. This is the best card in the deck. When I read this card, it's what made me want to build this deck. Obviously, it's a huge Ash target. If you do have access to cross-out designators, I do recommend running it just so you can make sure you never lose to Ash. But at the end of the day, that's a $50 card, and this is like a $50 deck. Only 1 copy of Awakening of the Possessed. This is actually searchable off of this guy who comes out from the deck and this card. So you don't need to run it in multiples. We're not running the beatdown version. I could see running 2, but here's the situation. So since the draw is a hard once per turn, the only benefit you get from having multiples of these on the field is the attack boost. And the number 1 rule that you always want to follow is, like, attack boost doesn't matter. Attack boost and attack lessening doesn't matter. It won't come up. The only situations where it'll end up winning is if your opponent bricks or is playing a bad deck. Like, that's a hard rule. And like I said, it is searchable. This is usually the main card I search off of Spirit Charmers, so I can get its draw effect. And the drawing does matter. And here's the thing, too. And I didn't even think about this when I was building the deck, but, like, Fairy Tale Luna is a light, Witch of the Black Forest is a dark, Hida is a fire, and Ausa is an earth. So it actually still does become relevant. Like, if you can do it passively, attack game becomes more relevant, but if it's what your deck is built around, that's when it becomes bad, right? So we move on to the main card of the deck. 3 copies of Secret Village of the Spellcasters. I find it to be a travesty that I was looking at a lot of deck profiles for this deck just to try to get some ideas, and I didn't see a single one running Secret Village of the Spellcasters. This is the single best card in the deck. Now, I know it blocks you out from spells, but I'm really, other than Spirit Charmers, you're not really running too many spells. And here's the thing that ends up happening, because we're running so many Spellcasters, that's never an issue. That Fairy Tale Luna searches, Witch of the Black Forest searches, the trap card can get us back out, the continuous spell can get us to draw cards. We're always having spellcasters, right? And the thing is Imperial Order just got banned because stopping spell cards is huge. And if your opponent draws a bunch of spells, regardless of what deck they're running, they lose to Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Now, obviously, Alistair.deck is really good. All the Shaddoll monsters are spellcasters, so it's kind of a hard loss to that. But that's where you sign in D-Barrier and just tell them to not summon fusion monsters. One Upstart, one Called By, one Monster Reborn, one Terraforming. Terraforming because we want as many copies of Secret Village of Spellcasters as possible, because that's the main focus of the deck. And that's what I said. I sometimes just have Luna sitting out there because I have Fairy Tale Luna, I have Secret Village of the Spellcasters. You can't play spells, and the first monster you summon, I'm going to try to bounce it, right? Absolutely phenomenal. And then these cards are just great. 39 card deck, stops that Ash Blossom I was talking about, and it's Monster Reborn. You got to run the Monster Reborn. And that's actually it for the spells. Like I said, not too many spells. 3 copies of Spirit Charmers, 1 Awakening of the Possessed, but it's mostly Secret of the Village of the Spellcasters. For the trap cards, running a decent amount of trap cards, 2 copies of Possessed Partnerships, only 2 because it is searchable, but 3 is definitely fine too. This is a phenomenal card. I cannot say that enough. This card is so stinking good, it's insane. I absolutely love this card. Usually what ends up happening with Spirit Charmers is I'll go get the continuous spell, Awakening of the Possessed, just so I can get those draws. And then when I summon out the Nefarious, the boss monster, the Earth level 5, when it gets sent, I'll send it to the graveyard for link material, and I'll search this trap card. And now I can use this card, pop an opponent's card, and draw a card. That's the best interaction, at least in my opinion, in the deck, is the fact that I can use this card to draw a card and pop an opponent's card. And summon out a monster. It's pretty actually quite insane. I really, really like this card. 1 copy of Metaverse because it's that serious. We're really, 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 really trying. I was playtesting this deck a lot where Metaverse came up a lot. Just oh gosh, I opened a bunch of cards, summon Fairy Tale Luna, search Snow. Oh no, what am I going to do? Okay, I have Metaverse, activate Metaverse in a standby phase. Boom, you can activate spells. 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Just so many reasons to run that card. 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This could be a Forbidden Chalice as well. Do keep in mind that it's a spell card, so there might be situations where you can't activate it under Secret Village of the Spellcasters. This doesn't fall into that, but it is a little bit more pricey of a card. And that's actually it for the main deck. The extra deck's not anything too super serious. It's just, 1 copy of Hita, the Fire Charmer Ablaze, 1 copy of Asuo, the Earth Charmer Removal, how you say it. The reason I'm running this one is because I'm main decking the Fire one. If you're running the Water one or the Wind one, you'd run the Windling monster. They all do the same thing. If they're destroyed by battle or card effect, they search a monster of their attribute with the exact stats that you're looking for. And if they're summoned, they summon a monster from your opponent's graveyard of their attribute. Doesn't come up super often no matter what you're running because usually your opponent has their good monsters on the field. Sword Soul and Virtual World, though, they do have a lot of different attributes. So that could come up. IP Masquerena, Nightmare Unicorn. Nightmare Unicorn still doesn't have a sleeve. So F in the chat for that poor guy. Or girl, I don't judge. And then number 41, Baguska. These are really the only monsters I would say are kind of mandatory in the extra deck. Really these 4 and this guy, sort of. I'm running Puzzle Limo because I love it. Access Code Talker because it's Access Code Talker. Same with Appaloosa. Sorry, Usure's a cool card, so I like it. Underclock Taker's fun. Nightmare Phoenix is fun. Digusto Emerald. Abyss Dweller, Tornado Dragon. And since I'm running so many Xyz monsters, Zeus. But really those first 4, those are the main monsters you want to run. And I am going to showcase, I know a lot of people came to this video already knowing how to play this deck. But I did want to showcase you guys what you can do with these 2 cards and any other 3 cards. Any other 3 cards literally will get you to this combo that I'm going to show you here. So we're going to activate Spirit Charmers, discarding 1 card. Not this card, any other card, right? Obviously, Ash Blossom, I can think of, there's a Psyframe monster, I think it's like Delta or something like that, negates spells. But for the most part, Spirit Charmers will resolve. It'll let you set Awakening of the Possessed and add Familiar Possessed Hida, the person we talked about earlier. Like I said, it can be any of them except for the Earth one. We're going to add that to our hand. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to activate Awakening of the Possessed, right? That'll allow us to draw a card when we normal summon Familiar Possessed Hida. So now we're going to draw a card, right? So we're already plussing. We've already plussed. Spirit Charmers is a 2 for 2 because it discards and activates itself to get 2 cards. And then now we plussed off of drawing a card. But then we're going to special summon out Archfiend, Eater of Nefarious. That'll allow us to send both of these two to special summon out Nefarious Archfiend. It's like the evolutionized version of the card. This is going to allow us to special summon either Hita or Nefarious Sir. I usually just go with Hita. Doesn't really matter super duper too much. And what that's going to allow us to do now, we're going to link these two away for IP Masquerena. When IP Masquerena is summoned, we're actually going to trigger Awakening of the Possessed Nefarious Sir's Archfiend's effect, which is going to allow us to search out Possessed Partnerships. Right? Possessed Partnerships is going to be added to our hand. And then we're going to set this card, right? So what just ended up happening now, during our opponent's turn, if they summon any monster, let's say they summon out a Soul Sword Mogi, or they summon out a Virtuous Ecclesia, right? We're going to flip up Possessed Partnerships, summon out the Familiar Possessed Hida. And what that's going to allow us to do, that's going to allow us to pop our opponent's monster because we have a Dark and a Fire. And what's super cool too is now Awakening of the Possessed is going to draw us a card. And now you know what we can do with this card? We can summon that guy out who doesn't have a sleeve, Nightmare Unicorn, and we can discard this card and shuffle back in. Make sure you click that like button and the subscribe button. Show your support for the channel. Most importantly of all, though, of course, as always, have a good day.